Human connection begins earlier than we imagine. But how early, and how deeply do our brains sync with those around us? Groundbreaking research led by Professor Victoria Leong has opened a fascinating window into this question.
Young babies are more socially sophisticated than you may imagine, and the brain is a powerful and mysterious organ that prepares us biologically to connect socially with other members of our species. And it is our challenge and a real delight to discover how the brain achieves this feat. So my personal experiences have had a strong influence on my line of research. And I can trace this back to individual children and individual families that I interacted with during my time as a special needs teacher. And that experience really impressed upon me the importance of this work, that it's not just about the joy of discovery and understanding how the brain works. It's about the practical importance of understanding how we can support the child in everyday life. So this study, in my view, was a methodological triumph. We were the first in the world to show that you can concurrently collect brain activity from a young child and an adult and be able to get a good enough signal to measure something like brain-to-brain synchrony. Prior to this had never been demonstrated before. And I'll be frank, there were most people whom I spoke to about this did not believe it would be possible. And so the demonstration, while empirically interesting, was also a methodological breakthrough. And in order to achieve this, we had to be very rigorous in the way that we collected the data and in the way that we cleaned the data and the way that we processed and computed the indices. First of all, infants are not your typical research subjects. They don't do as they're told. And so you really have to find ways to play with them and for them to enjoy the activity so that they spontaneously will engage with the task that you design. And so doing this kind of studies, the activities and the tasks that we design have to be engaging for children. So that's one prerequisite. The other prerequisite, of course, is that we're studying something that's quite complicated. So in real life, social interaction involves a combination of cues. We don't just look at someone, we also, touch them, we also smile, we also move, and all of that contributes to the level of synchrony that can be sustained between the adult and the child. The results of the research were really quite exciting for us to discover. We've known for a long time that there are a certain class of signals called ostensive cues, which we spontaneously use when we speak to children. And this allows us to get the attention of the child very quickly and allow them to understand our communicative intent. These cues include eye contact, but also modulating the way we speak, calling their name, etc. Now, our research was linking that research to this brain synchrony study and finding that for the first time, cues like eye contact were effective in raising levels of synchrony between the adult speaker and the child. So this was very exciting for us to connect, an existing body of well-established research on these social cues to this really new discovery about brain-to-brain synchrony. And that opened the possibility that synchrony might be one mechanism by which these social cues allow us to open communication channels with children and more effectively teach and communicate information to them. When we talk about the research, we talk about it in a responsible way. And part of that is understanding the limitations of the research designs. So for example, in that classic study which we've talked about with the eye contact, it was measured in a limited setting where we had the adult looking just at the child in one particular way and sustaining their gaze for a particular period of time. Now, this doesn't mean that the way to synchronize with the child is to pick them up and stare them in the eye for 30 seconds. I cannot guarantee that that will have any positive benefits on your child. It may not be particularly effective in increasing levels of synchrony in that kind of out of context way. But what we do want to be able to encourage is natural ways to put this into practice that are consistent with what we understand about good parenting and positive ways to interact with your child. So the way to interpret this finding is not to take it in isolation, but to use it to enhance your current interactions. So for example, when you're playing with the child, in the course of that interaction, maybe build in a few moments when you deliberately try to establish a moment of connection through looking at the child and calling their name, and use that moment of connection to introduce a new piece of information. So that would be a good way to kind of introduce this research finding in a very natural way into your day-to-day interactions, rather than just, I had to pick up my child and stare at them for 30 seconds every day. We now understand that there are a range of social cues that are effective in modulating levels of synchrony between the adult and the child. And the adult can be a parent, it can be a sibling, and it can be a teacher. And this range of cues includes eye contact, which we first studied, but also facial emotion cues, which are really powerful in strengthening that connection, and also vocal cues and gestures. So our line of research now is using that knowledge to help us to better design screening tools to be able to assess in a dynamic and very precise way the quality of the attunement between parent and child or teacher and child, and that can then be used to design pedagogical tools or intervention programs that are then targeted specifically to the needs of the child.
From the first gaze to the earliest words, the connection between adult and infant shapes the trajectory of a lifetime. Professor Victoria's research reminds us of the power of communication and of the many mysteries still waiting to be uncovered.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe and follow us for more groundbreaking research from the world of academia. Stay tuned for the next episode, where we'll shift gears and uncover a powerful study that sheds new light on global politics and domestic narratives.